So the first thing that I think we need to remind ourselves, especially as city managers that are, the chief operating officer or as a mayor that's responsible for these communities as a business, it's okay to say no. And I think we forget that in a lot of times. So there's different places to stick that no in. So I just want to lay that out. There's a lot of power in that process. How you structure that no is really where the art of this comes together. So I'm not sure everybody knows this and about property rights and entitlements because they mean slightly different things across North America. But the basics of it is that this is a framework that a property owner has where they've been told or they've been authorized either through zoning or master planning that they're entitled to construct so many units on a piece of property. And this could be a number of units, square footage, or retail or commercial. And they now believe that they can get X amount of units and they should be paid for X amount of units. And all across the country, there's case law with this that you can't go in and down zone it from 60 units to an acre to 6 units to the acre. That's a taking. You have to pay somebody for that. So that's something that there's a lot of case law on. But there's also some other nuance to it. So the governing body has the right to establish the performance standards for the development of those units per acre. My experience has been that even though you set a low bar of 6 units per acre for development, rarely, if ever, does a developer or are they able to achieve that maximum allowable units because the product types, the lot sizes, the stormwater, the roadway, the open space requirements, all those things chip away at the land. And generally, unless you're going to go up, you can't go out. So you can't yield the maximum amount. So there are things that you can do that the governing body has a right to establish those performance standards. And these are the rules of playing for development. With that, the standard zoning requirements that most folks take, you go out there and you see what the planners are promoting, the standard stuff that gets repeated in every community. They have the R zoning declarations, the C zoning for commercial, all of that. You need to throw all those out because those are what led us to this problem, and they've led to these false assumptions. And then what we end up doing is writing more regulations to make it more complicated to do these things. Those zoning requirements are all looking at the wrong metrics. So we really need to look at the metrics that you have for your community through a strong towns approach. Look at the strong towns principles and look at performance standards that don't tell you how many trees go on the street or how much yard you have to have. But you should be looking at things like, what are the long-term liabilities that are going to be with this neighborhood? What's the fiscal impact for this type of development? When is the rate of return for that development? The road widths on it are twice the size of what we have in the regular part of the town. What is that cost going to be? Those are the things that you dive in and you calibrate specific for a community. So you make sure that what is being built is equivalent to what previous development occurred within those areas. And you need to have different performance standards to yield the result you want. The other thing, and we talk about a lot in whether government should make a profit, which it should. Let's just be straightforward with that. It can't be running for a loss. And that's how we're into some of these problems in these communities. Governments can assign levies, they can assign impact fees, permit fees. You can apply all of this to your development. So if we think about it in a really simple way, if my development is right next to the water treatment plant, it's the shortest distance for that service to be provided. It's the least amount of pumps, the least amount of pipes. A development that is 10 miles outside of town is 10 more miles of pipes and pumps they should not be paying the same rate to one connect. And you wouldn't believe how many communities provide incentives by putting pipes in the ground for free, or share the costs with the overall ratepayers equally throughout that. They need to pay more for that. And that rate also needs to be paid more, not only for the construction and connection and capacity, but also the long-term maintenance of that line. And that should not be shared equally across all the ratepayers. And there's lots of ways to do that. But outline the structures. If you outline the real cost of development, both to construct and to maintain, and what that development will return back, you can justify those expenses and you bake that in. And yes, if somebody wants to build 10 miles out of town with that type of development, they're going to have to show that that fiscal is a fiscally sound investment. And sort of by default, you're going to show that things closer to town are cheaper, things closer to town are easier to build, infill's easier to focus on. So you're, again, looking at those fee structures, you're not impacting the property rights. If they can figure out how to make it work at that density and property rights, then they just need to demonstrate that in a different context. And this is what Tony and I are doing with Chuck across the country right now with the community action labs. We're sharing these types of thinking. And I hope this year to have more of that to bring back to our membership about what we're seeing in other communities. I know we in Lake County, we went through this. It's the same rate to connect to sewer. This is what the elected officials are telling us. It's the same rate to connect to sewer, to pay for sewer, 25 miles from the plant, as it is from 1 mile to the plant. So the 1 mile folks are subsidizing the development patterns they don't want. And so we hope to dive into that and come back to those things. So to summarize, it's okay to say no. The polite ways to do that is to set standards for the results that you want. And I would throw out the conventional zoning and the colored maps and all those pieces, and look at the performance standards that you have in your rights and authority of a municipality to do. And I would also look at what the true costs are and their communities. Fate, Texas has this development gets approved. There's a calculator they have that this development is going to have so much liability to the city fiscally as part of the decision-making process for those developments. That's what I would lay out as a piece. And I hope with some of our community action labs, we can test that this year with them so that people realize where this is, and we can focus growth. So the places that need to thicken up and the suburban stuff, as that stuff is happening, or the things built outside of town that are single use, we can show it costs way more than you think for that. It's not apples to apples for the in town or adjacent to town development.